Hey, I'm Silverpot, and today I'm bringing you Chapter 6 of Detention, a Kingdom Hearts fanfiction. Now before I get started, I just want to say that if you guys can like the video, if you like it of course, it really helps out the channel and even the dislikes too, so if you dislike it, leave a dislike. Anyways, let's get started. The street was dark, all but for the dim street lights reflecting off the wet asphalt as Roxas walked home from work. It was nearly midnight and his stomach had long since began to growl. It didn't help much that he worked in a restaurant, and he had to smell everyone else's food as he worked from 3 to 11. He had to close, and then, having no ride, had begun the long walk home. He worked at a Denny's 3 blocks from his school, which also meant all the way across town from Ghettoville. He was used to making the walk, but doing so in the rain wasn't the most desirable of situations. His hair and clothes had long since become plastered to his body, the rain relentless and heavy, pelting him like bullets. He wasn't going to get paid for another week, and he was in an awful mood due to the cigarette withdrawal he was going through. He should have known better than to get addicted to something. Addictions were for people who could afford them. He was relieved to turn on his own street, ready to collapse in bed and sleep, but knowing that he couldn't because he had a lot of homework to do. He trotted up the steps slowly, pushing the door open tiredly. The first thing he saw was Leon sitting in the middle of the floor with his head in his hands. "Squall?" Roxas asked quietly, using his older brother's real name, as he always did when worried about him. His brother's head shot up and looked at Roxas, his deep brown eyes troubled. "What happened?" he asked, closing and locking the door behind him before approaching his brother and dropping into a seated position next to him. "It's nothing, Roxas. Don't worry about it. I imagine the lack of groceries means that you're out of money too? I sent Sora and Namine to friends' houses. They'll get fed there, but I don't know what we're gonna do for the rest of the week." "Well, we'll think of something," Leon said quietly. "Rox, I gotta tell you something. I got fired today." Roxas felt his stomach drop. They were barely managing to keep their apartment as it was, not to mention feeding Sora and Namine. Roxas's paycheck just wasn't enough to cover it all. Jobs were in high demand, especially in Ghettoville, and it would be extremely hard for Leon to find work. "Leon," Roxas said quietly, "we haven't paid this month's rent yet. We were going to cut down so we could afford it." "I know," he responded, his voice just as quiet. "I'm sorry. I'm such a fucking failure at this." "Shut up, Leon," Roxas snarled. "You're doing your best, we know that. Damn it, you shouldn't have to do this. You shouldn't have to raise us. You escaped Ghettoville, and we yanked you right back into it. You shouldn't have had to drop out of college just to take care of us." "But I did, Roxas, and I'm not doing a very good job at it. The landlord will be around for rent in 3 days. When he sees that we don't have it, he's going to kick us out." Roxas took a shaky breath, his eyes falling closed in distress. He knew that he and Leon were tough enough, hard enough to make it on the streets, but Sora and Namine were just kids. Despite the place they'd grown up in, they were innocent and good. Too much for being homeless. Sitting on the floor with his older brother, Roxas realized for the first time exactly how screwed they were. Everything was falling apart around them, while they struggled vainly to hold it together by themselves. Roxas has always believed that as long as they stayed together, everything would be okay. But now he knew those were childish dreams. "So, what do we do?" Roxas asked quietly. Leon looked over at Roxas for a long time, his eyes saying that he had no idea what to do. Finally, though, he spoke. "I guess we start packing up. Only things we can carry around with us. Also, we need to find somewhere to send Namine and Sora. I can't have them living on the streets." Roxas nodded in agreement, but he frowned as well. "We don't know anyone who can take them in, Leon. Do you think we might have to put them in the system?" "I really wish I could say no, Roxas, but I think that's exactly what we have to do." Roxas nodded, suddenly feeling completely drained. "I'm sorry, Leon. I just can't handle this right now. I'm gonna head to bed, and we can talk more about this tomorrow, okay? Sora's gonna fight tooth and nail against us on this." "I know, Rox. Go to bed." As the blonde made his way down the hall towards his room, he heard his brother whisper quietly, "I'm sorry." " Having no answer, he slipped inside and collapsed on his bed, sleep claiming him in seconds. He awoke to his alarm clock early the next morning, but his answer to that was the slap it off and fall back asleep. The next time he awoke, it was the C-section sitting up next to him, slouching against the wall. Roxas instantly knew something was wrong. Zexion hated to slouch. He sat up, looking at his friend worriedly. "What happened?" he asked. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong with me, Roxas. It was you who has the problem. Leon told me everything. I'm sorry." The memories from the night before hit him hard, and he could feel the pressure building behind his eyes. He didn't want to cry, but it was a difficult task to accomplish. Roxas dropped back onto the mattress, pulling his thin blanket tightly around his shoulders. "What time is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "About 4:30. Zexion answered, his hand coming to stroke through Roxas's hair softly. "Your new boyfriend was looking for you today. He was pretty upset that you weren't around." A tiny smile slipped across Roxas's lips as he thought of the fiery redhead. "He's not my BF. I mean, not officially or anything. It probably won't happen now." Zexion sighed quietly, his hand stilling its movements through the blonde's hair. "I haven't spent much time around Axel, but from what I can tell, he doesn't seem shallow enough." No, that's not what I meant. I guess I think it might be too stressful to deal with him on top of everything else right now." Zexion nodded, his hand continuing its motions. "I don't know, Rox. He might be exactly what you need right now. A break from reality, you could say. He could be someone strong to lean on, just because you don't feel right leaning on someone else. I normally wouldn't make that assumption that you could do that with him, but it really says a lot that you let him pay for something for you." That was true. Roxas hated taking money from people for any reason. He wasn't exactly sure why he'd let Axel pay for the previous morning, but it really wasn't a common occurrence. "I really like him, Zex. I don't want to drag him down with my problems and scare him away." Zexion was quiet for a long time. His head leaned back to stare at the ceiling. "You do what you should, Roxas. I'll be behind you on it either way." "Thanks, Zex." Roxas paused, wondering if he should push the subject or not before deciding it was his privilege as best friend. "So, you and Dimmick seem to be getting along pretty well." Zexion shifted slightly, but otherwise showed no form of discomfort. "Yeah, I suppose. He's interesting." "Extremely bubbly," Roxas interjected with a grin. "He kind of reminds me of a 13-year-old girl." Zexion smirked at the assessment and nodded his head. "It's endearing," he admitted, eyes closed, possibly to avoid looking at Roxas. The aforementioned grinned wickedly and prodded his friend's side. "You like him," he accused. "I knew something was up yesterday when we were paying so much attention to whatever it was he was talking about. You usually ignore people who ramble, and Dimmick's was most definitely rambling. I can't believe you like him. He doesn't seem like your type." "How do you know what my type is?" Zexion demanded, petulantly. Roxas shrugged, propping himself up on his elbows and watching his friend intently. "I don't really know. I always just imagined you as someone studious and quiet, but smart, kind of like yourself." "And what about Axel?" Zexion retorted. "He's the kind that usually annoys the hell out of you, and yet you practically salivate every time his name comes up." "I do not," Roxas gasped, slightly offended. "I don't know, there's just something about him, something different that I kind of like. He's like a breath of fresh air, something so far out of the norm that he's just completely desirable." "Exactly!" Roxas exclaimed, wondering how Zexion had known just how he was feeling. "Exactly," he responded. It was then that Roxas realized that his friend had been talking about Dimmick instead of Axel. "Well, that's good. I'm happy for you. I think you two will make a great couple. Your personalities complement each other perfectly." Zexion snorted. "Didn't you meet Dimmick yesterday? How can you even know such a thing?" "It's just a feeling I have, Zex. Besides, he's totally interested in you. He was asking after you yesterday at lunch." Zexion shot him a wry smile. "I'm not worried about that. I'm not so dense that I couldn't tell he was flirting with me. I just wonder how he'll react when he finds out about my disfigurement." "You're not disfigured, Zex. It's just a scar." "A large scar? One that blinded me. It still repulses me. How could I expect him to react any differently?" Roxas thought of the bubbly blonde he'd just met the day before. Something told him that a scar wasn't something that would deter him from liking Zexion. But then again, he really didn't know the other blonde very well. "Zex, I don't think Dimmick would care too much about it. I mean, he might be a bit shocked at first, but I don't think that he's small-minded. If he is, well, you deserve better anyway." Roxas realized that they had come full circle. Just 2 nights ago, Zexion had begun giving him that same speech about Axel. Zexion seemed to realize this as well, because he gave a quiet chuckle. "Perhaps I shouldn't judge him too harshly yet," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Well now that we've talked ourselves into being more trusting of those around us, I think it may be time for you to head out to the living room and speak with Axel. Roxas made a strange choking noise, sitting up quickly. Axel? He's here? How long has he been sitting out there? I'd say about half an hour. He'd been worried about being too intrusive by just showing up, and I told him I'd warm him up to the idea. That was your idea of warming me up? Damn, Zex, you suck at this, he cried. I probably look like crap. I've been sleeping all day. I haven't even showered or brushed my teeth or anything. Zexion shrugged simply. Do it now. I don't have time to take a shower. I can't just leave him sitting around forever. Last I checked, Sori was keeping him quite busy, asking about his intentions with you. He assured me he'd wait as long as it took for you to wake up, so I'm sure he won't mind waiting for you to make yourself presentable. Roxas let out an annoyed huff of breath before pulling himself out of bed and hurrying to make himself presentable for the red-headed sex god waiting for him in his living room.